podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and in this new series, I'm delighted to introduce you to a small number of coaches who specifically focus on coaching men. We are aware that many men are struggling with their lives, their sense of meaning and purpose, their relationships, finances, physical and mental health and well-being. You'll hear from some of those who share their own life-changing stories, why coaching men matters, the various approaches they use, and the impact they are having. My guest today is somebody who specialises in coaching men with what he calls healthy masculinity. Drawing from his background in regenerative farming, chaplaincy, and mental health support across Africa, Sam Adams is going to share with us today his journey towards coaching men through his own personal and professional challenges. We're going to explore the balance between masculine and feminine energies, emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and the shame and guilt that many men carry. You'll hear how Sam uses nature, seasonal cycles, and outdoor activities to help men reconnect with themselves, embrace their own spirituality, and the full spectrum of their humanity. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today, Sam Adams. So Sam, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. It's really good to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So perhaps a good place to start today would be to learn a little bit more about who you are in the world today, the work you do, and how you've arrived at what it is that you do today, Sam.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I coach men. I work exclusively with men, and I'm interested in exploring and supporting my clients with what is healthy masculinity and how can we use this concept to succeed in our families, in our personal lives, as well as at work. And it's a personal journey, Rob. Maybe we'll get into that, but it's been a lifetime of debate and inner tension for me to come up with some answers and tools and frameworks, which I now share, obviously, with my clients. But it's very personal. It's because I had challenges. I felt confused about identity. For me, it showed up as insecurity, terrified of public speaking. I struggled with relationships. I made bad decisions. So there's a lot of trial and error that's led to me now doing this type of work.
I know from the initial chat that we had prior to recording off air, you've got a fascinating history. You've travelled around. Your background sounds really interesting to me. So maybe you could share some of that with our listener today to provide a deeper context.
Sure. There's a few threads that we touched on before in the background call. One was being born in London, but moving to Africa in my teenage years. And I spent 15 years in Zimbabwe, Uganda, South Africa, and built my early career there, where I ended up overseeing regenerative farming projects and helping people connect with the land and with food and with ecology. In parallel, I was working in a religious community as sort of a chaplain at my university, volunteer in mental health spaces and support groups that covered spirituality and psychology. I didn't really know what coaching was back then, but that's another strong thread for me. Both of these things of nature practice, food, travel, and then the people side of things and how to take care of ourselves as humans.
Wow. And I'm curious to the link from that background to what it is that you do today. You talked about healthy masculinity, and I'd love to get into that and what that means to you. But also, I'm curious as to how you've actually arrived at coaching men specifically and why you feel that's important.
My take on it is that it's hard to be a man these days. There's sort of a confusion and existential internal battle that I noticed in men I talk to. That was certainly my personal journey. Young men struggling to know how to engage in relationships, how to just show up with these different narratives around what it means to be a man. Case in point, do I open the door to let a woman come in? Growing up or decades ago, that would have been seen as chivalrous. But in the last 20 years or so, I feel like it's reversed into, no, that's chauvinistic. At least in the man's mind, there's this sense of, I'm not too sure how to behave anymore. And what does it mean to be in relationship to other? How to be a good dad, how to be a boss or a employee, whatever, to show up with these natural instincts, or be like my dad, be like my granddad, or quite the opposite. I don't want to be anything like my dad. Where are the role models for men who would be our sort of unofficial coaches in childhood, modeling what it means to be a man? I don't think we've had that. I don't think our fathers had that. How far do we go back? What ends up happening is men feel anxious and it becomes internal. There's an internal angst. So we distract and we take up addictive tendencies, or we withdraw and we just become a yes man. It's hard. And I'm noticing men more and more looking for answers, which is a good thing. This theme of this podcast series now is bang on target, bang on time. And it's very exciting to be part of the conversation.
So that leads us neatly into this concept of healthy masculinity. I'm curious what that means to you and what that looks like today, appreciating that it is an evolving thing.
It's a concept, and it's important straight off the bat to differentiate masculinity from maleness. Masculinity is an idea that all people and all of life forms can draw upon to help us understand ourselves. And I'm going to say there's a spectrum. Masculinity on one end, the masculine pole, and on the other end, femininity, feminine pole. That does frequently look like heterosexual relationships, the beautiful romance, the erotic polarity, and the battle of the sexes, Mars versus Venus. But it doesn't have to, because in each of us, in me, there's masculinity and femininity. And part of my journey of personal growth is to embrace both of them. So when I am helping men to be confident men, that's also what I'm doing. So that's really important to emphasize, that coaching men invites men to consciously embrace these two concepts, masculinity and femininity. And a true healthy adult behavior, I believe, knows how to play along the whole spectrum. So that's the context.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Sam. That's a helpful context and certainly gives me a few visuals to work with in the context of our conversation today. So with that in mind, where do you feel some of the tension is in terms of the work that you do with men?
Well, let me answer your other question, because I haven't got there yet.
Okay.
What does that one pole look like? What is masculinity?
Yeah, good point.
Masculinity is another word for order, for structure, for linearity. The brain neurologists tell us that it's the left hemisphere of the brain. So in each of us, half of our brain has this singular focus that's task or objective driven. For me, I use that interchangeably with masculinity. Femininity is the right half of our brain, and that's about trust, surrender, flow. That's about peripheral vision. That's about slowing down and seeing the whole, absorbing and assimilating. But you've asking me, and we're exploring healthy masculinity. I feel like the world is full of great teaching around healthy femininity. It might not use that phrase, but there's been a lot of mainstreaming of the feminine. But what's missing is healthy masculinity to meet healthy femininity, so that we can dance together and flourish together, both within and relationally. Healthy masculinity looks like having that singular focus without being narrow-minded, blinked, and ignorant of the bigger picture. It means having order and discipline without being workaholic, without being so structured you're suffocating any other aspect or you're closing down creativity. I invite the men I work with to have both. Yeah, let's focus in and let's pause. Take a breath. How does it feel? What else is in the conversation? What else is in the peripheral vision of this workflow? How do I integrate that? Maybe I don't, but at least to ask the question. So healthy masculinity has all of that. That's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah, I hear in that. I mentioned or alluded to sort of evolution earlier, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are in terms of how that energy, that masculinity has evolved over the last decades, the last 100 years or so, into where we've arrived at today in a very fast-paced, noisy world, and trying to navigate that space from that point of view that you're describing there. So I'm curious to your thoughts around that, Sam.
Yeah, my thoughts on that are many, and it's painful. It's painful, and it requires naming where men have made mistakes.
Yeah.
Because part of the reason we're in the current predicament of male existential crisis or the crisis of masculinity is because of masculine overreach. Some people call it the patriarchy. That is a political, social, cultural reality longer than we can remember, where that type of left brain thinking has ruled, that sense of bringing control, bringing order, closing down creativity or peripheral vision. That's been the mainstream narrative, and that showed up as overreach. And I'll give examples like slavery, colonialism, and capitalism in many ways. It showed up as extremely religious systems and control of government. Government meaning govern the mind, control of the mind. We need control. But the point is, for thousands of years, there's been overreach, and woman, ecology, the feminine instinct, the right hemisphere of the brain has been oppressed rather than partnered with. So here we are in 2026, trying to work through some of that mess. And as men, I notice, and I speak for myself, there's a hidden narrative that says being masculine is wrong. So then what comes up for men is shame. It's not okay to be a masculine man. Maybe it's not even okay to be a man. So then there's gender confusion, identity confusion. Let me just be kind, do whatever my wife wants, do whatever the boss wants, do whatever I'm told, rather than thinking for yourself. This is the context we're in today, where I think men carry a weight of shame. It's not okay to be in my left hemisphere. And I'm challenging that and saying, that's half of your brain. That's half of being human. We all need the left hemisphere. We all need masculinity. Let's just do it better than our forefathers without overreach. Let's hold it in tension with the other half of being human.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So there's a number of concepts in there and a couple that stand out to me. This concept of overreach that you mentioned there, in terms of how, I guess, like anything that becomes unbalanced or amplified, it can become toxic. So there's an element of that in the context of overreach there that I was picking up on. There's another aspect to this, which is about how we balance that off, but also leaning into it in a way that it's okay to be like that. It's okay to be logical. It's okay to be left brain. So it's this tension between the balance, or finding the right mix or the right balance between those and perhaps other types of energy is what I was hearing there, Sam.
Yeah, balance. I think that's the key word. That's the challenge and the opportunity. How can we partner internally to have both in our teams, in our families, with our children, in that great dance of life? I think it's the eternal struggle. And this is just the latest iteration of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned challenges there, but there's also benefits to this. Before we go there, I'm curious, are there any other challenges that you see when you work with men in terms of how this shows up? What aspects of their life does it inhibit in many respects?
It's pretty foundational, Rob. I mean, it covers that core essence of being. How do I position myself in relationship to everything else? So it does show up across the board. It shows up in how my family manages its finances. How do I assert my needs as a parent with my children's needs? How do I plan? How do I negotiate? How do I feel well inside? How do I feel mentally well, emotionally well? And how do I assert my needs? Is it okay for me as a man to have needs? Because if a man has shame, then his narrative is, I'm not good enough. And if you believe you're not good enough, then you're going to swallow your needs. You're going to just dance to everyone else's fiddle. So it's across the board. And I feel sad about that. I want the men I work with to be able to say, my needs are important. I am important. So let me at least bring it to the table and see what's possible. It doesn't mean I always have to have my way, but it's just that starting point. When I wake up in the morning, what does Sam need today?
Yeah. I find that very revealing, actually. You've conjured up a number of thoughts in my mind there in terms of how this shows up and how this could show up for many. And I suspect that for many men, it's the first step is to get some support, or perhaps the awareness of this. It's first the awareness, and then it's a case of getting some support. And I know that for many men, asking for help can be a real challenge in itself. That requires courage. But then there's an issue around courage, and I'll be curious to your thoughts on this. What's going on for them through that process of asking for help and resisting asking for help? And then when they do ask for help, are they asking for the right kind of help? Because there's all sorts of different challenges and tensions going on around in the masculine space, as you described it earlier. So yeah, I'd be interested to your further thoughts on that, Sam.
Yeah, that's an insightful question because it is the starting point. It's the starting point of my programs and other coaches I know is about emotional intelligence, emotional literacy, and that word courage you used. Courage, maybe we all know this, comes from the French word for heart. To be courageous is to express your heart. Courage and vulnerability go hand in hand. Brené Brown and others have been writing on this for years. So men need to be courageous. In fact, men like to be courageous and brave. That's what the heroic male is. But it starts not by going to defeat a giant. It starts by opening up his heart. How do I feel? That's vulnerable. And it goes back to childhood, which is part of the collective wound here, which is implicit in parenting styles. It's implicit in the media. Boys don't cry. Grow up. Grow a pair. All of these phrases we may have heard in childhood, what they do is they teach the boy child that vulnerability equals failure or weakness or it's not male. And that's devastating. So many of the men I work with struggle to connect their emotions. They disassociate it. Or the opposite, Rob. I'm noticing this as well because there's sort of a pendulum swing happening. A lot of men are so full of emotion. They're struggling to get focused. They're struggling with the opposite. They're struggling to actually get cracking through their task list, tick things off because they're so full of feeling. They're so full of, oh, I don't feel like this right now. I feel like that right now. I just want to play with my kids. Beautiful things, but it's not balanced. Both examples are out of balance. What they both require is emotionally healthy maturity where I know how I'm feeling and I can then make an adult choice. What do I do with that emotion that's in me right now? Do I put it on the shelf and come back to it at an appropriate time, like in my lunch break after I've done my tasks? Or does it need attention right now? What I would like the men to get to is acknowledging, right now, I'm feeling sad and what I need is just 5 minutes with a best mate on the phone, or I need a long hug with my partner, or I need to go journal, or I need to go to the shed and have a big cry. Whatever it is, they're all valid options and there's countless options, but it starts with that man pausing, taking a breath, noticing how he feels, being courageous, being vulnerable to ask, and then taking action.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk and ask quite a broad question here, which is, what do you feel needed in the world to help men feel more like they've got options when they're stuck like that?
The one word that stands out as an answer there is permission. It's why I call my work Liberating Masculinity. I feel like men are in a cage, maybe of their own doing, maybe just this collective wound, this collective shame of being male. And we need liberating from that cage that says it's not okay to cry and other sorts of spells that are on the male psyche. So to break that spell is to break that cage, is to let the wild man out who can cry, who can shout in an appropriate space, who can express things. So it's about permission. And that can look like different things. Often men learn through doing. So I like to take men out. We go walking, or we have a group retreat and we spend time inviting people to step out of their comfort zone to try something. Like right now, you got permission to shout. Everyone can shout. Let's just lift our hands up and shout to the sky. You got permission to have a wrestle. Like, anyone want to wrestle? You never wrestled before. Maybe we'll get some boxing gloves out and some gum guards. You have permission to punch a man in the face. Wow. You have permission to sit down and meditate. We'll teach you some breathing, or to share how you're feeling without being interrupted, or to listen to another man share how he's feeling. And you have permission not to try and fix it, just listen. So all of these are practical doing activities on the events I lead, where men get to have a bit of fun, try something new, be vulnerable in so many different ways, each one giving a man permission to redeem a notion of himself that got suppressed over years of internalizing misandry, sort of male hatred, or the shame I've already mentioned.
I'm keen to learn more about the work that you do. You mentioned being outdoors there, and we've had a series on coaching outdoors where I learned a tremendous amount about the benefits of coaching in an outdoor context and with nature. You hinted at it there, and I'd love to lean into that a little bit more to learn more about the work that you do with men. What you feel the benefit of being outdoors, being out in nature is in the context of the work that you do, Sam?
So this is a really personal issue for me because I've told you already, I spent years and years in Africa farming, 20 years of learning how does nature work. And my takeaway that I'm bringing to coaching is that nature is a mirror to our psyche. The seasonality, the rhythms of nature, spring, summer, autumn, winter, the complex, beautiful, chaotic ecosystem that is out there is also within. And I just keep stumbling across more and more metaphors of self. So what is it like to be like the sun? Let's start there, because when I teach men, I'm saying the male metaphor out there is the sun. That's the masculine archetype. The moon is the feminine. Well, that's one way of looking at it. So why do I mention that? I told you earlier that masculinity is order. The sun is ordered. It comes up in the morning and it's there. It moves through the same flight path and it sets somewhere else. It changes very slowly. So it's quite a structured, organized chap. Whereas the moon represents our femininity. There's a bit more flow there, a bit more changeability, a smaller time scale for change. She will change over 28 days. He will change over 365 point something days. You get the point. So what could we then learn as men to be more like the sun? What other aspects does the sun have? The sun radiates light. That's the masculine within all of us. That to radiate light is to use your voice, is to shine, is to communicate, is to be assertive, is to penetrate a space with that energy of light or sound, words, whatever. That's masculinity. The moon is a reflector. She doesn't generate her own light up there, but femininity is bouncing off another light. And that's her gift. The feminine gift is about, wow, how can I? It's not a passive thing. It's an active reflection. Part of the overreach is making the moon wrong. Part of the overreach is saying femininity is weak. It's not weak. It's strong. It's just different. I could go on and on about different species, different plants, different metaphors, different stories. It's not just me though, Rob. It's across cultures around the world. It's across mythology and stories and folklore that we see this time and again. And it's really only in our sort of industrialized West where we've forgotten a lot of this. So I'm not new to this by any means. I'm just helping others to remember some of these ancient stories, dare I say, truths, certainly metaphors, to help us be better, to be better animals. We're animals after all ourselves. It's not us versus nature. How's that land with you? There's a lot there.
Yeah, there is. You remind me, one of the themes that I picked up from the Coaching Outdoors series is the fact that we are nature. And everything you spoke to there reminds me of that fact. And I think it is very easy for us in this day and age, particularly with all the tech. And to your point there about the industrialization and the sheer modernness of life, we forget that actually innately we are human and we are part of the natural world. One of the great things about being human is that we adapt, and we've had to adapt. And perhaps a lot of what we're talking about today is adaptation and having to adapt to the world that we live in various different ways there. And it's fascinating to look at it from this perspective and also to hear your perspective there using one metaphor. And I'm sure you use many when you're outside working with men. I'm curious, what other activities, what do you find yourself doing or working with? And I noticed I used the word doing there, particularly in coaching. There's this whole concept of doing versus being. And does that come up in the work that you do, Sam?
It certainly does. And once again, it's about balance. I grew up with this meme going around saying, we're not human doings, we're human beings. But that's just as polarized as the other one. It's missing the balance. It's missing the point. I'm a human being and I'm a human doing. Being is in the feminine end of the spectrum and masculinity is doing. It's okay to do. I've got a social media post coming out in the next couple of days saying, men, it's okay to listen to your instinct to fix things. Fix it is good. The world needs fixing. The world is broken in so many places. All of us could use our masculinity to assert solutions and make the world a better place. But that shame we've been talking about closes down that instinct to fix. Like, oh, it's not okay. My partner keeps saying I should stop trying to fix the situation. Just listen to me, husband. Just listen to me, darling. I don't need you fixing. And we can take that quite far and take it to its extreme. It sounds like she doesn't want any masculinity. But I'm going to suggest it's more about the order. First, the heart. How does it feel? Be with the feelings of your partner. Be with the feelings of your children. Take as long as it takes just to be with that. That's the courageous vulnerability. Take a breath. Now, can I fix something? Do you need my help? Ask. Get consent. If she says no, great. If she may say yes, yeah, I'd love you to brainstorm some ideas. I'm getting stuck here. So, and I just want to jump back to the seasonality there. Feelings for me is the spring. It's the beginning of that annual cycle. How do I feel in the morning? How do I feel in the beginning of the year? Spring starting in March, traditionally, before the Gregorian calendar. Then summer comes. Summer's about fixing. Summer's about doing. So being perhaps is first, then doing. Doing's the summer.
Yeah, it's interesting how you're bringing the seasons into that. And again, it's almost metaphorical in that concept. And how do you find these concepts land with the folks that you work with?
They land well. I think because they're accessible, versatile, it doesn't matter on the man's background. We can all relate to seasons. We can all relate to different times of the day. So I mentioned spring, but it could just be morning. How do I feel when I wake up? Then the action is the busy time. I'm now at work. What am I doing? What am I doing in that heat of the day? Then autumn is afternoon. How do I slow down? And then winter is night. Winter's about rest. It's about decomposing. It's allowing the brain to percolate and decompose. So they're quite accessible. They're abstract, but they're accessible. We may, even for urban youth, who they may have played it in a game, they understand the changeability of school years and seasons. And it gives permission. There's that permission word again, that it's okay to be in a flow state, up and down. Actually, it's cyclical, that I can go around. I don't have to be in this linear trajectory all the time. That's actually unnatural. Nature's not like that. So when I look to nature, I give myself permission to also have my own inner rhythm of ups and downs. It's okay.
It's really fascinating to me how the themes of shame and particularly permission surfacing regularly in our conversation today as this being core aspects. Another one I'd love to get into with you here, Sam, you're touching on non-linearity. And for me, whenever I think of that, I think of creativity because that's a very messy, non-linear thing. And perhaps it's a more feminine thing. I hadn't really considered it at that depth. But when I think of creativity, I think of sort of spirituality. And I'm sensing that on some of the themes that you're talking about here, particularly in terms of the work that you're doing, metaphors. But I can imagine when men sense that they need some support and then they arrive at your doorstep and they recognize that there are different things that they could involve themselves in terms of working with you. There's various steps, I imagine, that they go through, maybe not in the same order necessarily, but there might be some common themes in terms of the breakthroughs that you see those that you are working with go through. I think for a number of men, spirituality isn't something that they really stop to think about or consider. And I'm curious that particularly with the outdoor work, whether that comes into play or whether that's something that you see, do you find men aren't necessarily in touch with their more spiritual side and then they gain a connection? Does that help liberate them, to use one of your terms there?
100%. It's essential. And our generation, and perhaps the one before us, are the only two generations in the history of our species that has not embraced spirituality.
That's interesting.
In the post-church secularization of the West, we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater because religion became suffocating, throttling. It was too much structure. It was overreach. So we've rejected that, but we've lost 1/4 of being human. If the first quarter is emotional intelligence, the second is embodied intelligence, the third is intellectual intelligence, the fourth is spiritual intelligence. So I put that on a par with all the others that, we need to remember what spirituality is. Or should I say spiritualities? Because I'm not here advocating one religion. While I grew up in Christianity, I then worked with Muslims in East Africa and farms there. And I wrote a book on Islamic agriculture. I then discovered Eastern non-duality and yogic traditions and tantric pathways, and then came back to sort of more of a nature-based animism. Spirituality is everywhere. It's only our little bubble of Western thinking that has forgotten it, and we're poorer because we've forgotten it. I'm pleased to say that's changing. I'm seeing people re-looking at spirit, and there's been gifts for that, ways we've all sort of accessed it through media, through yoga, through exercise. Giving a man permission is saying, hey, how about in our session today, we practice a prayer? You got permission to ask the unknown God for help. And getting into that, a bit more of the male psyche is you have permission to not know the answer. It's vulnerable for a man to say, I don't know. But if you don't know, then one great option is to ask for help. So say a prayer or take some time off to listen to beyond self, whether that's meditation, breathing, ice bath, sauna, a retreat, singing, chanting, a vipassana. There's so many ways to connect with spirit, but it just starts with that first green light. You've got permission to also be a spiritual human. In fact, you need it. So come with me on a journey to explore spirit.
And in terms of the sorts of breakthroughs that you see, do you see men go on that journey? Do you witness this breakthrough, I would call it, or this connection where the moment they give themselves that permission, they're operating at another level?
Yeah, I think the main one is the burden comes off the shoulders and the man says, oh, I don't have to do it all on my own. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to surrender. And that's a feminine attribute, the ability to trust and surrender. So it's, again, inviting a man to embrace his femininity that can just lie down on the ground and dissolve into that moment. I'll take a man maybe to a cemetery and we'll talk about death and we'll talk about the afterlife and the questions that we can't answer. We might climb into a yew tree. Yew trees represent reincarnation and the way they grow. So we'll sit inside an ancient yew tree, or we'll go to a burial chamber, or we'll hike in a place where our ancestors built Iron Age forts or Paleolithic forts. And we'll just imagine what was it like beyond the memory, beyond history. That's what spirit represents. Spirit represents beyond knowledge. So how do we then engage with what we can't see? And yeah, men then touch into something bigger than themselves, which arguably we need more than ever. Everything's so fast, food, instant, scrolling. It's like, well, hold on, let's slow down and remember a lineage beyond time. It's powerful.
Yeah, I get a sense of that power as you describe it there. There's a number of thoughts in what you just shared with us there. I could see how that could be quite a powerful opportunity for many to think of themselves as part of this lineage, as you described it there, but also part of something much bigger. And that word you used, I felt, was a very powerful one, surrender, and the ability to surrender. I was very curious about what you suggested at the beginning of your response there in terms of this relief. And I'm curious whether you see a lot of that. I'm wondering, because I don't know, and I'm curious to what you know or you see, Sam, is it quite a masculine thing to carry the load, to try and do it all yourself, to not ask for help? And is it the release of that you see as part of that relief that you witness?
Yeah, part of it is the relief from carrying it all. I think deep in our bones, there's a male instinct, maybe it's the left hemisphere, to want to be a help, to go ahead, to ride ahead of the pack, to check there's safety. So we've taken that on. It's very hard to do that in modernity because there's many more pressures these days. The lines are more blurred. So there's burdens for all of us, men and women, all of us. But to give a man permission to rest does seem quite radical for many men. And to name it, to bring it into consciousness, because some men are maybe arguably lazy and they need coaching to get off their butts and to overcome procrastination. But bringing that healthy masculinity is to say, right, rest time is Friday night to Sunday night. And rest hard, my brother, go and rest well. You've got 48 plus hours to go and rest to best, rest to the best. But then Monday to Friday, let's work hard. So it's delineating time to say to the man, don't mix it all up. Like, let's have some clear boundaries of basic coaching and self-management. But it's about giving permission for both and compartmentalizing, which for a younger man these days seems quite like a new thought. They haven't done that so much. Everything's so blurred. I can access the world through YouTube on my toilet seat, and I'm answering work emails in bed. Previous generations were a lot more boundaried. So healthy masculinity is also about boundaries, and boundaries create safety, and safety can look like rest.
That's really interesting and fascinating. And for some reason, it's not the first time in our conversation today when you've described masculinity, I think of the business owner or the business leader, if they happen to be male, which, let's face it, a majority are, and that go, 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 and it doesn't stop at the weekend and it doesn't stop in the evenings, and it's taking on more and more and more. And it's like this flywheel going out of control. And what you're saying there is almost the polar opposite in my mind, which is this resting, and to put it in your words, resting hard there and actually creating those safe boundaries and those boundaries of safety where, again, for me, it comes back to permission and surrender there, where you actually give yourself what's needed. And I can't help but instinctively feel that with those boundaries, the performance then that comes back in the working week, so to speak, is all the better for it.
Absolutely. And it's applicable in different timescales. We've talked already about the week, but if I look then at the annual calendar, I take a shorter work week in the winter. I'll work 30 hours tops from about November to February. The rest of the year, I'll work 40 to 50 hours. And I'm smashing it. I'm smashing it in the summer. I'm producing a lot of output. And in the winter, I really have to hold back because I'm used to working so much. And I'm thinking, no, I give myself permission to rest. And that looks like entertaining certain long form luxuries like jigsaw puzzles or long walks or going away or reading longer books. And really saying, this is the season, this is the nature metaphor, that winter is there for a purpose. Shareholders don't like that. Shareholders want consistent graph that's going up. And I'm saying no to that. Healthy masculinity has temperance. We need that boundary to say winter looks like everything slows down.
That very neatly leads me to a question that I'm keen to ask you about your own rituals and habits in terms of looking after yourself. And I think you've begun to answer that question there for me. I'm conscious of the time and we're moving into the close here in our conversation today, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your own rituals and habits and what it is you do to keep yourself balanced.
Yeah, I have a few rituals. They've looked like different things over the years as my children have grown older and life is real. Right now, it looks a lot like working with the moon as a calendar on top of my usual normal calendar. So when there's a new moon every 28 days, then I pause. Myself and my partner will just read something about the new moon that we find. We'll light a candle, we'll sit still, and I'll just go through the next 4 weeks of the lunar calendar. And I'll say, this is what's coming. Do we have any prayers for this? Do we have any needs that we need to ask each other? Anything just to put in the consciousness to say, it's quite a busy month or quiet month, or we've got the in-laws coming. This is what the astrologers are saying. This is what nature's doing out there. We know it's winter, or it's summer, we're going camping. Then that sets the scene in terms of logistics and our hearts and even spirit. Say, right, this is what the next cycle looks like. I like to do that. That's sort of my go-to at the moment, Rob. I can think of other ones where I've told you about working longer in the summer, but also in the summer, it's time for traveling for me. So I like to get out, visit clients, go visit friends. I've just decided to take a lot more time off in August. And then winter, I'm much more in the home. I sort of nest down, come inside, I'm researching, I'm thinking, I'm percolating all the stuff from the year. I guess you could call that a ritual, sort of an annual scale.
A lot of that sounds very intuitive and instinctive in many respects. So I like that. And I think there's some nice ideas there. I love this idea of the new moon as a reset opportunity and an opportunity to reflect and also look forward in terms of what's coming up in the next few weeks and to look at things in that context. So I love that. Before we wrap up, Is there anything else that you would like to offer our listener? Any tips, or is there anything we haven't covered today that you feel is a theme or a topic that we ought to acknowledge?
I'll throw in that with the men I work with, we often follow the solar cycle. So if I have a gathering, as I do at the equinox, end of March, and at the end of September, equinox means equal night, equal day. So then we talk about all of these themes about balance. How can we slow down? How can we speed up? How can we be both angry and soft? How can we touch our edges? So that's more of the balance themes. And when we meet in the midsummer, that's peak masculinity. If we meet around June the 21st, that's the summer solstice, when that masculine archetype is highest, most potent, most erect. What does that mean for our bodies? How do we express that side of being that type of male who's very sort of alpha? And is it okay to be alpha? How do I want to be alpha? And then if we meet in the winter, then we'll slow down. I take men every winter underground. We'll go into a cave and the coaching session will happen there with candles and darkness. Like, what does it mean to be the opposite of alpha? To really surrender, to decompose in the body of the earth. And it gets pretty adventurous and weird at the same time in this cave. So I want to emphasize here at the end that let's have fun. Let's be creative. Let's give ourselves permission to be any aspect. There's not one masculinity. There's not one way to be a man. The emphasis is on liberating yourself by connecting with your own freedom and the masculinities and the femininities within.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So I imagine our listeners probably quite intrigued about everything you've shared with us today. So they may wish to reach out to you, Sam. So where's the best place for them to connect with you and to learn more about the work that you do?
Just go to my website, liberatingmasculinity.co.uk, and there's hashtags, links to socials, past podcast episodes. I run a free monthly workshop on healthy masculinity online on different themes to do with being a man. liberatingmasculinity.co.uk.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us, Sam. We're recording this sort of mid-May, and it won't be too long before this episode comes out. Curiously, you mentioned midsummer there, so it's going to be around about that time, I think, when this episode comes out. So given that and the arc that we're on in 2026, what does the rest of the year look like for you?
I'll be at some big festivals in the summer. So that's taking a lot of my time, is bringing some of this work to young people. Massive festival of 180,000 people, and saying, hey, it's okay to slow down, even at a festival environment. Let's come, let's share, let's talk together. That seems quite radical for a festival. And I'm just looking outside. I want to get in the garden. Yeah. I love gardening. I was a gardener for many years and plant some seeds with my family. So yeah, thank you, Rob. It's been great talking to you and such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show, Sam. Thank you so much for your time today. And that's a lovely image to leave us with, the thought that you're going out there into the garden. So I'm very grateful for our conversation today. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events for your continuing professional development.